For the past 2 years, I've had a nagging feeling stuck in the corner of my mind, at the edge of my consciousness. Unshakable, but quiet. Over time, though, it got louder and more clear somehow, but still inaudible, like a phrase being chanted without language. But slowly, as the months ticked by, the whispers slowly found a semblance of voice, just barely out of reach. And then, just like that, I finally grasped it. I heard it clear as day. A phrase. A beautiful phrase. Just 2 simple words. I scrambled for this dusty microphone, praying its half-corroded battery would be enough to capture my epiphany, to immortalize it. And that phrase? It was so obvious. Deltarune tomorrow. If that intro wasn't sign enough, I want to go ahead and give any and all viewers a fair warning that this is a Deltarune Chapter 2 era video posted in the 11th hour. I will be talking with the full assumption that you have thoroughly played the demo and have kept close enough tabs on the community between chapters. If you don't know what a friend inside me or a penumbra phantasm is, I invite you to keep listening, but you may be confused at times. Also, I know at least half of you watching this probably don't know or remember who I am, but that 2 years in the opening, not a random pick. So just as a quick aside for those who care, call me Piles of Azrael's Dust the way I've actually just been away at college. After starting, I just never found the time or willpower to get video production rolling again, but a Deltarune release was just the jumpstart I needed to get motivation and momentum back. No firm promises, but I think this will be the true end to the Jummy channel's hiatus. After this, I got some other ideas up my sleeve, Toby Fox related and not. But enough of that, you're here for a nut dealer, and Newt alert, I will deliver. I'm sure you can see by the chapter markers, but this video is split into theories, concepts, and then a miscellaneous general discussion section to top it all off. For the first 2 of those sections, I try to discuss only things that I haven't really seen anyone else talk about in the same way, but fundamentally, these are just a couple years worth of mad ramblings that I have to get out before the end. And speaking of, apologies if this video seems a little simple or a little rushed, it's because it is. I am currently recording this at around 2 o'clock on June 2nd, and I need to finish recording and edit this in time enough for someone to actually watch it before the release of Deltarune on June 4th, so, apologies. But in any case, first up are the theories and observations. Starting off, we have Weakpoint Theory. In the Punch-Out Arcade section of Chapter 2, Queen says that the Fun Gang's transformation is combining all of their weak points. It's a weird line, not really a joke and barely banter. It seems to just be a statement of perceived fact. So if we take the idea seriously, what are each of them doing when Queen says this? What are their weak points? Well, Rouse is acting as the subservient ideas guy, literally being walked all over. Susie is being physically strong, and Kris is being the leader. A cursory character analysis says this is them all using their strengths, but we already see from hints in the game and 7 years of community analysis that Susie isn't the brute she makes out with herself to be, that Rouse's servile attitude is weird, suspicious, and unhealthy, and that Kris's charismatic leader persona isn't even their identity at all, with the whole increasingly obvious possession angle. So then, whether this exact line of dialogue from Queen is meant to be foreshadowing or not, I think either way we'll be seeing the Fun Gang break further and further from their legend-prescribed roles more and more with each chapter. And we've already seen Kris begin to do this. They aren't supposed to be any sort of mastermind, just a brave, determined, stoic human leader. But Birdley mentions in his ramblings that despite implying that they don't even try, Kris is the number 3 in their class. And as if this idea were some sort of setup, then there's that ending where Kris almost certainly executes a premeditated plan to have the sleepover and make a customized TV Dark World. Yes, they slash the tires to make Toriel keep Susie in the house, and they open the door, presumably for Undyne to discover the dangers of the Dark World. But those are done in the moment. Between chapters, before Cyberworld and before Kris should know how to make a dark fountain at all, they plug in the dusty old TV. The same TV they specifically turn on before making the fountain. This portrays them as much more calculating than most characters or players would ever expect. And so, following Kris's example, how might Rouse, Susie, or even Noelle similarly break their own molds? The GIASFELFEBREHBER metaphor theory. Speaking of most players, most Chapter 2 playthroughs I've watched think they have to solve this messed up spelling puzzle by going inside and solving it from within. But the real solution is outside the box. You have to think from the edges, outside the boundaries of the game. Now, the puzzle really doesn't have any point or reward, except, of course, for helping complete the hacker's blue checksmarks quest, which leads to Spamton, which, if the Popo592's wonderful theory is to believe, Spamton in his Neo form is being puppeted in the game by image_friend from outside its boundaries. And then, of course, the puzzle's entire existence is a reference to the monster word search from Undertale. And the solution shows a glitchy IC, a character first shown in that word search from Undertale. I'm asserting that all of this is just one subtle little clue to, if maybe only subconsciously, get us crazy people and casual players alike thinking about how someone might be pulling the strings from outside the bounds of this device. Theory, 10 Hours, by Molly Stars, and how the answers to some mysteries may lie in what came before. It's nothing we who have Entry 17 carved into our skulls don't already know, but if this was intentional, it's a very cool piece of foreshadowing. Though, maybe not a very effective piece. My mentioning it here means I haven't heard anyone over the past 3 years mention it once, so, The Long Night. As an extra piece of evidence and just a reframing of the argument for any Kris Night truthers out there, checking the window in the Dreamer teen's bedroom at the beginning of Chapter 2 says, "Even after a long night, the sunrise is the same as always." Coming right off the heels of the presumed pie fake-out, this seems to be Toby telling us that there is, in fact, actually more to what Kris did that night than just eat the funny pie. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't call a night where I get up, eat a pie, and go back to bed a long night. Maybe a good night, but not a long one. And then I feel you just have to look at it logically and narratively. At the end of Chapter 1, Kris brandishes their knife at us before doing something off-screen. At the beginning of Chapter 2, Toil reminds the player that Kris not only had a knife last night, but that it's specifically their knife. Then, Queen's hologram of the knight's long hand, perhaps during that long night, uses a knife as the weapon of choice that stabbed the Earth to thrust forth the cyberworld's fountain. And then, of course, in the ending of Chapter 2, Kris uses their knife to create a dark fountain on screen. All of those points together creates a pretty objectively clear picture that Kris probably created the cyberworld fountain that night after Chapter 1, even if they had to shamble across town to do it. All of that is pretty much undeniable in my eyes, but I still can't blame anyone who wants to call it a red herring, especially on the Queen's points. The game makes it clear to specify that Queen's footage of the fountain's creation didn't reveal anything about the night. So, her example imagery for how it works was just that, an example. So if the knife imagery was meant to push us towards assuming Kris, that's the game and Mr. Tony Fox pushing us in that direction, not Queen. And the other evidence points could admittedly still go in other directions. This is just the Occam's razor option. Cruisy ending interaction. Forgive the ship name, this section title just flowed better that way. But in any case, the Chapter 2 ending that's burned into all of our brains by now cuts to black 3 times as Kris does their thing. For the record, I don't think it's meant to obscure anything that Kris is doing while we're not looking. It's just to make the scene flow better. It would absolutely kill the pacing to watch a teenager shamble around the living room for 3 minutes, even if what they're doing is interesting. But either way, the first thing we see them do is open the door, then they turn on the TV, and then they're standing in front of Susie. The clear implication is that they did something, but I have no idea what it could be. Did they give her something? Take it? The only thing I can possibly think of is that maybe they took the remote from her for some sort of Dark World manipulation reason. But that's half-baked at best. If you have any ideas, please comment. I am losing my mind. Rapidly shrinking life. Just a small observation. In both the normal and weird routes, Spamton makes sure to specifically say that Kris has an ant-sized, rapidly shrinking life. Of course, this is more than likely just a throwaway threat, but the fact that it makes the cut in both dramatically different timelines lends it a little more credibility than the rest of his babblings. So what if we were to take the idea seriously? We don't get much, admittedly, but there are a couple ideas worth noting. For one, it implies that whatever fate the prophecy and/or Gaster has in store for Kris will not go well for them. But on the other hand, if they have a life that can shrink, then that means they are currently alive. Which usually wouldn't be in question, but this is the soul-ripping school zombie we're talking about. I fear Ice Lake Theory may be so over. But not really, this is probably nothing. Human extinction? I'll make this quick, this has even less going for it than the last one, but I still want to get it out in case I'm dead on. Remember when Birdley said that cavemen died out because they're stupid? Obviously it's a joke line showing that Birdley's dumb, just like the "a broken clock's right once a day" quote. But when you consider the idea in conjunction with Kris's clearly complicated relationship with humans and even just human imagery, humanity might be all but extinct in the Deltarune timeline. And if it's true that only a human soul can seal dark fountains, that puts Kris and Kris alone between Earth and the Roaring. This literal weight of the world on their shoulders gets a whole lot juicier too if you believe the Kris zombie theory. And hey, there clearly aren't any other humans in Hometown at the very least, so since that's where the Dark Fountains are, you don't even need humanity to be gone for that same story to be told. I see good fanfic potential at the very least. Concepts. I already just got pretty close there, but now it's really time for the concepts part of the video. Or, if you will, the theories without evidence part of the video. Starting with, how could Darkners exist in the light world? Whether it's Sans and Papyrus to make many a theory work, or even if it's just to get someone like Rousey or Lancer to help us out with Hometown problems in a future chapter, how could it work? I have 3 ideas. Number 1, purity. The simplest answer. We've never seen Rousey try, so it's possible that Darkners from Castletown's Pure Fountain can already enter the light world. Probably not. But even if they could, I imagine they'd still be tethered to the closet in some way. Number 2, Heart of Darkness. Late game, I can totally imagine Malleus being able to forge an item out of shadow crystals, glow shards, the pure crystal, or something along those lines that lets us empower at least one Darkner to be able to leave with us into the light world. Rousey is, of course, the most obvious choice, but if you follow any of the Darkner resurrection theories regarding people like Gerson or Rudy, it's possible a chapter could revolve around trying to use the heart to fully revive a dead Lightner. And then who knows how such an object could be used on the weird route. Number 3, symbiosis. The basic idea here is simple. Darkners are made from dark fountains are made from determination, and determination comes from Lightners. What if a Darkner found a way to tap some of that life-giving, form-maintaining determination straight from the source of a willing Lightner? You could visualize this like Darkners becoming sort of like a JoJo's stand, a Homestuck sprite, or something along those lines. But whatever the case, if each currently active Lightner got a Darkner to attach to themselves, who would pick who? Well, Susie and Lancer are obvious, and Noelle and Queen seem to fit pretty well after they've both had their arcs. But what about Curdley? The obvious, unenlightened pick for Kris is Rousey, but I think Kris's true patron Darkner is good old Spamton G. Spamton. Oh right, Burgley. Yeah, I have no idea. The honest-to-angel best match I can fathom for him is the Hacker, but if you have a better idea, please leave a passionate comment. 3 paragraphs minimum, due on my desk June 4th at noon. Undyne's Delta Arc. In chapters 1 and 2, Undyne's character has simply been a bored, overqualified small-town cop desperately wanting something interesting to happen. So working from there, here's what I imagine her role will be in the story moving forward. Whenever she happens to make it into a dark world, she's not going to go evil or anything, but she's going to be a problem. Think her role in Undertale mixed with Susie in Chapter 1. She's gonna fight everything that moves, from basic enemies to the fun gang themselves. And if you want to get a little more speculative, I think it'd be a nice subversion if Undyne takes out the big bad of the chapter very early, her effectively replacing them while the former ruler becomes the secret boss. But after all the battles, explosion MP3s, and whatever else she gets up to, When things start getting real on both an individual chapter scale and a whole game scale, I believe she'll prove herself once more to be the true hero. When the roaring comes, I have no doubt she'll spend her time rescuing citizens and punching titans in the face, while the fun gang plays, or refuses to play, their role. She's been the avatar of a dying Earth's will before, has she not? Hopes, dreams, and predictions. To wrap up the video, and as my little send-off to the Chapter 2 era of Deltarune's community, I figured I'd do a bit of a more informal section, where I talk about what's next, from the likely to the unlikely to the friend inside me. Starting off with my Knight prediction, I think I've already made it pretty clear that I'm a Kris Knight person. I've seen many arguments for and against it, and it is simple and it eliminates a mystery pretty early on. But to me, I think it's just the most interesting route. I have faith in Toby's writing to make whatever direction he goes in great, but with what's already set up in the actual game, I just think Kris is the coolest and most sensical pick. It gives Kris more agency and depth as a character, it explains the odd blind spots they and Rousey force onto us, and you saw the Chapter 2 ending. They just look sick as hell doing it. This way also inherently ties the Knight plot to the player possession plot in a way that naturally eases the more casual, non-Gaster pill Delta head into the higher concept aspects of the game's plot, i.e. device theory and such. But there are good options beyond them too, and all my eggs are not in the Kris basket if I'm trying to honestly predict what's actually going to happen. In my ranking of likely Knight candidates, it'd be number 1 Kris, number 2 Alvin, number 3 Mayor Holiday, and number 4 would probably just be Multi-Knight Theory, where Knight is just the title given to someone who makes a dark fountain. But that explanation could easily be lame if not done right. Although, as an alternate number 4, after watching insanely ADD's Papyrus is Hiding Something video, Pappy Knight isn't looking half bad. But I still don't honestly expect it's going to happen. Probably. Go watch the video. I know I've said that a couple times already, but it's very good, even just as a normal video on Undertale Papyrus without any knightly considerations. And then to me it's so obvious that I'll just toss it onto the Knight section here, but Noelle's obviously the angel, right? Someone like Gaster, the player, or anyone like that could also technically be the angel too in a secondary meta-narrative sense, but in the basic story of a first playthrough, it's Noelle. But on that note, Death is a good number 5 slot for the Knight's identity. That way, giving 2 important roles to the 2 Holiday siblings. Although December doesn't have to be the Knight for that same general idea to be true. Who Undertale's angel was depended on the route, but either way, it was one of the Dreamer siblings. Perhaps it's the same here, where which sister is the angel depends on whether Gaster remembers you are Snowgraves. But moving on, I've heard so much about it over the years, but I really just don't know if I love second voice theory. I won't say it's absolutely untrue, but when most people seem to think it's evil, stronger than you Kara coming straight from the Undertale No Mercy route to kill everyone in Hometown while Megalo Strikeback plays, it's just kind of exhausting. It's like a remnant of the more aimless and unoriginal side of the Chapter 1 era theories before Deltarune managed to establish its own identity. Don't get me wrong, I love Kara Dreamer and I love the Demon, but their stories ended in Undertale. That said, on the other hand, second voice theory does still hold some water, especially because I don't know why Gaster would court us on Twitter so delicately, only to pull the rug out from under us. The more I think about it, I think my problem is less with the second voice itself and more with what I've already said. So, I do have 2 options that I'd be happy putting my money on, Rousey or Des. Those picks are really just based on vibes and ingrained ideas from years of Delta theories, though. I could certainly tie them into Jaru Jaru time loop theory or any number of Des theories. And if I have the time, maybe I would, but with the shadow of the dog's paw drifting worryingly near, I'll leave my 2 cents at this. If it's Rousey, between Asgore and Asriel, the goats in Undertale did establish a tradition of cryptically talking to you just before you wake up. But speaking of money, Megalovania. I don't think there's any chance it shows up in chapters 3 or 4, but I think it will definitely show up in Deltarune at some point. A late-game Weird Route battle is the obvious pick, and I'd love to see Susie join the ranks of Sans and Aradia. I've seen some people kick around that it could be someone like Sham or even Sand again, but I'm all in on Susie. But continuing on the music train, what about Woody Theory Friend Inside Me and Penumbra Phantasm? I really don't know, but I sure do hope. I give them both a good 60% chance each, though like Megalovania, Penumbra would probably show up way later. Update, apparently Toby just said in an interview that no songs originally composed for Homestuck would appear in Deltarune, which makes the chances of Penumbra go way down. But you can still do some mental gymnastics to make it non-zero. I refuse to go below a 20% chance. 10 minimum. Thanks to Mr. Brick & Co. for being my news source. I'm lastly interested in where in the world the weird route could possibly lead from where it left off. Is Birdley really fallen down? How will Hometown react to a perfectly healthy teenager just falling over dead at a study session? Will they suspect foul play, and if so, will they suspect Kris, Noelle, or Susie? I can see a world where Mayor Holiday kills two birds with one ice shock and blames the perfectly innocent Susie to free her own daughter of suspicion and handle a known delinquent while she's at it. Though her ire could just as easily be turned onto Kris, depending on what really made the Holidays and Dreamers grow apart. But that's pure conjecture, and it could be that nothing quite as dramatic as that even happens at all. But what's not conjecture is that at the end of Snowgrave in the hospital scene, Noelle said she'd investigate what's going on with Kris. I am very, very interested to see what's going to happen with that. But there's another thing related to the weird route that I find interesting. What I'm probably second most known for on the internet in general is my Chapter 1 weird route concept, but back then I was going with the old, generally accepted fandom idea that the weird route would basically just end up being the Geno route with a party system, where we would corrupt a new person every time, and Chapter 3 would have the spooky Toriel Firegrave route. But as we've learned more through the Spampton Sweepstakes ARG, we learn that the weird route seems to actually be a byproduct of Noelle's unique aura that seems to corrupt games creepypasta style. I'm making light of it, but the blog posts are extremely interesting. I love what they reveal about her character. But that means that a Toriel Firegrave route is a no-go for Chapter 3. I don't say that to lament having to rewrite my Chapter 1 concept, though. I say it to bring up something really cool that seems to be somewhat obvious now, but I haven't seen anyone else mention it. So Noelle has this secret game-corrupting aura, right? Well, so does Susie, and it's no secret. They don't work in exactly the same way, but just as Noelle's presence allows the story to go off the rails in ways that Kris/the player can't do on their own in the weird route, Susie messes with the story on the normal route. She negates our choices, learns S-action, and her taking Rousey at the split path is what enables Snowgrave to even happen in the first place. It may not feel like she's breaking the game at first, since her version is the only version of Deltarune we know, but by the way Rousey reacts to her shenanigans, she isn't doing things as the prophecy foretold. Therefore, she's breaking how the game is supposed to go. And at the very least, she's definitely resisting the player's influence on the details of the prophecy. Her changes are just ironically more subtle than Noelle's corruptions. It all just makes me wonder how these reality-warping lesbians will end up changing fate when all's said and done. What happens when they get to spend a little more time together and their auras synergize? I'm very much looking forward to either finding out or writing it myself. Whatever the case, be on the lookout for a nice and long video after I've had time to osmose the new content. But beyond all that, I guess there are just a bunch of miscellaneous things I can't wait to see more of. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of characters Caddy and Jockington become. I obviously want to learn more about the Knight, the Angel, and the Prophecy. I wonder if we'll get even a single line of dialogue from Azrael, or at least something indirectly telling us when he's showing up. I'm interested to learn more about the Song from the Sea from Onion. I'm excited for the secret bosses, even if they're not Mike, or Tenno, or Petaley, or Sheriff Woody. I want to see if anything starts to shape up for the currently interesting yet useless items like the eggs, the shadow crystals, the glow shards, and the dog dollar, I guess. And then, speaking of items, I personally just love the item fusion system with Malleus so much. But I wonder how much it's going to actually be used beyond Chapter 2. I hope a lot, and not just for the Twisted Sword and things like that. And on that note, though, I suppose waiting to osmose new content is truly all that there's left to do. I know I haven't been an active presence in the community for most of the time between chapters, but I'm sure you can tell that I've been lurking. This whole time, while I've been doing homework or playing games, I've been listening to Shay, Jaru, Guilty Flygon, Misty Sparkles, Andrew Cunningham, Sock Muppet, Vivat Veritas, Nighthawk, Dante's Integrity, Spooky Dude, Ashevale Lane, Choco Fox 7, Snarlinger, Cammy Boy G, Spampton A. Spampton, Tony, Spampton B. Spampton, Sheriff Woody from Toy Story, Roast Chicken, Carpet, and all the other lovely people who I'm sure I either forgot while writing this script or who made like 1 or 2 banger videos but I never learned the names of. If you're watching this video, I'm sure you can relate at least a little. All of these voices of the Chapter 2 era of the Deltarune community have been a constant, beautifully brain-rotting presence in the background of these very pivotal past 3 years of my life. I mean, I've already said it, since Chapter 2 released, I've started and made it halfway through college, going through all the personal changes you'd expect might happen during that time. It's bittersweet to know this era of proceeding and potassium is coming to a permanent close, but I'm optimistic for what the future will bring. And that this time I might be a bigger part of that future. Perhaps my name will make someone else's list another couple years down the line. But I've got a little time to prepare. Future, in this case, means... Wait, Deltarune is actually tomorrow? Also currently will be canon, guys. You just have to trust the process.